All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about Tag Manager for Security and Compliance. This is the third part in a series of webinars specifically around tagging and Tag Manager specifically. We're really excited to visit with you today with a couple of guests that will be joining us about security and compliance. And so we'll jump right into the conversation. On the agenda for today, we'll talk about cloud security from a panel discussion perspective. We'll discuss cloud tagging challenges, and we'll walk through a Tag Manager demo, as well as provide a special offer at the end. Today, the panelists that are going to be joining us are varied, and Anthony Johnson, who's a managing partner of Delve Risk, will be joining us. Anthony's been a CISO at a number of organizations. His experience and expertise is really phenomenal. We're excited to have Anthony join us. Dan Thormasgaard is also joining us, I believe from Florida, and Dan is a CTO at Thor Group. He's been at Fishnet Security, at Fish Tech, and now as an advisor at a number of security startups. My name is Doug Aber. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing. We'll also have joining us Mark Williams, who's the founder and CEO of CloudSaver, as well as Andrew Chapman, who's our VP of Operations here at CloudSaver, and he'll be walking us through the demo midway through the presentation. Without any further ado, we'll jump right into the panel discussion. And we'll start that with the first question here. There's been a hyper convergence in the cloud since early 2020. What are some of the challenges in migrating or growing essential functions of an enterprise with DevOps, SecOps, FinOps, compliance, et cetera, to the cloud? Mark, is that a question we can hand to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Doug. So first of all, when we're talking about this hyper-convergence to the cloud, let's just kind of level set. I mean, what we're really talking about here is companies are making this rapid shift away from their on-premise infrastructure environments to the cloud environments, right? So they're moving all their data, their applications, all their IT services to the cloud. Now, this has been going on for quite some time, but what we see is that the pace at which this is happening has definitely accelerated. And the reason that companies are taking advantage of this opportunity to move to the cloud is because the cloud has some very inherent benefits, right? Scalability, flexibility, cost effectiveness, things of that nature. So, but as they're making this transition to the cloud, there's a number of pretty significant challenges that they're facing. First is probably the most important here is just making sure you pick the right, get the right cloud architecture for your environment, right? So first of all, which apps make sense to, or apps or services make sense to move to the cloud, what needs to stay on-prem, things of that nature. And then is it public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, edge cloud, all of those types of things. Getting that piece right is an area where you really have to be thoughtful in your design and architecture. And then once you have your the architecture decided, then you have to decide, what types of services are you going to use when you are in those cloud environments. In other words, do you want to manage all the servers through like an infrastructure service platform, or more of a platform as a service environment, or do you want to go full serverless in a full managed environment? So making sure you get the right architecture and then the right services, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing because they want to make sure they get it right. And then kind of shifting gears, another big challenge is making sure they maintain a really strong security posture. And, honestly, the challenges that around security in cloud, there's a lot of familiar things that have been around with network security for a very long time. Access controls, identity and access management, encryption, network security, compliance, incident response, all those types of things. But in the cloud, it looks a little different, right? And so people need to be especially thoughtful when they're going through and designing what their security program is going to look like. And then the last kind of big challenge that I see as people make that transition is I kind of put it in a big bucket of visibility, right? So these cloud environments are super dynamic, right? I mean, it's so easy to stand up resources, and people have got great intentions, but people also get busy and they forget about things. And so it's very, very easy for these cloud environments to sprawl out of control. We help companies manage their cloud costs all day, every day, and we see this behavior all the time. So the way you combat that is really just through getting good, strong visibility into your cloud environment. And as you think about visibility, there's kind of operational visibility in terms of the performance of all your cloud resources, but there's also like financial visibility, be able to actually monitor and analyze all of your costs associated with your cloud environment. And regardless of whether it's operational or financial visibility, both of those are largely dependent upon proper tagging of the cloud resources. These, and we're going to unpack this for you a lot more later on in this session. But tags really are the data anchor points that you can use to really enable that full operational financial visibility along the way. So, Doug, I'll turn it back over to you for the next one.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. So question number 2 is really around data and asset tagging being essential to a well-managed cloud. Mark alluded to that, but many organizations don't make it a priority. Can you help us unpack the why, Anthony and Dan?
Absolutely. Yeah. Dan, how about you go first?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, because it is, I think so far they haven't been, it's an extra effort as part of the CI/CD pipeline or part of the development process. And so far there hasn't been any specific compelling reasons for developers to do it other than what just Mark mentioned. And in addition to that, lack of accountability in terms of ensuring that is addressed. There's many other things that are top of mind for the developers, obviously feature functionality, and addressing the concerns of the application, so go-to-market strategy, et cetera. And those are kind of like household, those are items that are oftentimes forgotten. Anthony, anything you can think about in terms of that as well, and why it hasn't been done?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to why inventory management remains one of the Achilles heels of any good, well-run cybersecurity program, is because it's fundamentally, it sounds like a great idea. Hey, you want to know where all your things are. You want to know where all your assets are. You want to have them tagged appropriately. So it sounds easy, but in practice, it's historically been very difficult. It's been hard for organizations to do. So they kind of skip through or gloss over it if they do it at all. And same thing for inventory management. If you tell me any security or IT leader who says they have a 100% complete CMDB, I'm going to call them a liar more than likely, right? It's just something that takes a lot of work, which is why I'm so excited about the topic today, because I think that it tag management brings an enormous level of ease to something that has eluded people because of the level of difficulty and pain overall.
Yeah, I agree. I would say the interesting piece is that it's very important, right? Think about from a SecOps perspective, the importance of understanding who the asset owner is in contact of that particular asset for any vulnerabilities that are discovered, et cetera. So there is an overwhelming, compelling reason as to why you would want to do this, but completely agree, Anthony. It's just been challenging.
Let me add one other piece. Is that I think we mentioned this when we were kind of talking about this, preparing for this session today, is that it's not just a gift or a benefit to one function, right? There are a lot of security or a lot of IT things that can happen in an organization where the people who reap the benefit, or the sole owners, or people who realize the value, are the ones who just did it, because it's mostly for them. When it comes to tagging, tagging effectively allows multiple organizations and stakeholders to derive and realize that benefit, because it plugs into the compliance component. It can plug into, cost components, security, well-managed IT. And so there's just a tremendous amount of value that can be unlocked if this is done appropriately. And it's just eluded people because of the difficulty, in my opinion.
Well, thank you both. I think you illuminated some challenges that have really plagued traditional security teams that identifying the resources is challenging. Remediation didn't always fall into their hands, and that's a similar challenge from a cloud ops perspective, and certainly from a security perspective. Thank you. My third question is really, if data and asset tagging in the cloud were easy, how would that impact the communication and strategy with an organization? And I'll maybe pass that over to you, Dan, first.
Sure. Well, we kind of touched on that just a minute ago on both on compliance from a security perspective, both from a SecOps perspective in terms of understanding the asset, the criticality of the asset, who the asset owner is, and being able to triage in a resourceful manner. Clearly, one cost analysis in terms of organizations, so not just on the security side, but on the operational side and cost management side, who, charging back to various different groups in the organization. That oftentimes is the case. We've seen some maturity there over the course of the past 5 years. Originally, it wasn't so, but becoming much more so. Accountability on costs. The other aspect would be compliance, like who's responsible for the areas. Is there PCI? Is there HIPAA? Are there compliance areas that need to be impacted? So asset tagging that particular device is impacted by a compliance objective. There's so many that make sense. And it is very interesting that as of today, it just really has been kind of ignored. Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think about a lot of things when it comes to life decisions, IT, as a series of doors, right? Like there are some doors in life, they're two-way doors. You open them, you can walk right back through them. And there are other doors in life, they're one-way doors. Once you open that door, you can't put the genie back in the bottle here, right? And the reason why I kind of mentioned that is that tagging, appropriate tagging, like appropriate data management, appropriate asset inventory, actually creates an opportunity to walk through a door that is just a series of hallways. You can now have a tremendous number of new conversations that you didn't actually know were even possible. You didn't know what was behind that door at all here. And so that goes into the collaboration between teams. It goes into, just like you mentioned, efficiency, effectiveness, and things that other things that were hard to do suddenly become much easier. And I think that you'll find organizations able to move much faster and prioritize things in some really interesting ways that they have not historically been able to do in the past, right? So again, I think it's having clear insight, clear tagging, clear mapping, visibility is just such a critical important component. It's just it's this massively powerful thing that I'm just excited for folks to be able to kind of say, hey, okay, we've walked through that door. Look at all these new conversations we can have, right? And we can avoid that other hallway that was horrible with doors that were just bad conversations that could lead on to other bad decisions.
Oh, that's a great visual, Anthony. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else to add from the two of you on that topic?
No, I'm good.
Yeah,
Well,
same here.
I'll introduce Mark Williams here again. Mark is the founder and CEO here at CloudSaver. Mark has learned more and I think become an expert specifically around the cloud, but around tagging specifically, when that was probably not something he intended to do. But excited to hear from him a little bit about what are we hearing from customers? What did we experience as CloudSaver, leveraging the cloud to be more agile, get more flexibility, be more nimble, improve performance, reduce costs. We're going to talk a little bit about our experience again from our customer base, and I'll introduce Mark here to jump right into tagging.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. So yeah, maybe just a little background would be helpful here to understand kind of why we ended up building our tag management solution in the first place. So at CloudSaver, we've been helping large enterprise companies manage their cloud costs for years and years and years. So we've been dealing with tags with customers and all of the challenges that come with them, from the very beginning. And so we talked a little bit earlier about visibility and how important it is to help understand your environment from an operational perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And tagging really is that integral data anchor point that we need to be able to understand what's going on. And so we've been managing tags just through, candidly, brute force. And it's a very painful process. And so all the pain that we've heard kind of mentioned on this call today, we've experienced it firsthand as we've helped our clients go through and solve that problem for them. And so, we decided, hey, this is a great opportunity to go out there and really build a really elegant solution around tag management. And so that's kind of how we ended up here today. So let's just kind of talk through, tagging. So first of all, we've hit on this several times already, but tagging is absolutely an integral part of modern cloud management, right? And it's not just a FinOps function. It's not just about cost visibility. It touches all aspects of the cloud management function, right? FinOps, DevOps, CloudOps, security. It touches everything. And so, and really just, it drives the visibility so you can slice and dice the data and see what's going on. So it has multiple kind of avenues where it provides a lot of value. It's not just a FinOps function. But, when you properly tag your resources, now you can start doing things like drive accountability. You can enable show back and charge back from a billing perspective. So now you can start allocating your cloud bill to different billing units, whether it's departments or applications or however they want to do it. But it also unlocks the ability to do things like automation. So if you want to do automate like patching, for example, or backups, you can now lean in on tagging as the trigger points to help manage that process. And obviously, we talked about how it impacts security and streamlines governance along the way. So with tag being as important as it is, it's pretty amazing that this problem hasn't really been solved to this point, because every single company that we've encountered, hundreds and hundreds of companies, they all struggle with tagging. Nobody has got this thing solved. And in fact, there was a study that came out, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, that said that 86% of companies have extremely poor tag hygiene, right? So in other words, they're doing a very poor job of tagging their resources. I think just talking through our panelists, I think those thoughts were kind of echoed in their comments as well. And so the big question is why, right? Why are companies struggling to maintain their tag environment? And we tried to distill it into kind of 4 major topics here. So when we think about the challenges around tag management, we call it tag coverage, compliance, completeness, and clarity. And I'll go through and kind of unpack these for you. So when we talk about coverage, really what we're talking about here is are you putting tags on your resources? Do you have a conscious effort to go there and actually attempt to put tags on? And you'd be surprised how many very, very large, sophisticated companies have just incredibly poor tagging within their environment, where they're not even making an attempt to put tags on a large majority of their resources. And then from a compliance perspective, what we're really talking about here is it's all about policy management. In other words, do you have an expectation of what tags you want on your cloud resources? Have you put together a policy that says that, I want every EC2 should have these 5 tags on them, right? And I want to also not just tag those resources, but I want to tag all of the subcomponents along the way, right? Do you have an expectation? Do you have a policy in place that you can enforce? And so, having an expectation really drives the behavior of what you want your tagging environment to look like. And what we find is that most companies just don't have that level of sophistication yet in their tagging environment. The third big issue that we come across is what we call tag completeness. And this is and we see this all the time. This might be one of the things that we see the most prevalent across our customer environments. And that's, let's just take like an EC2, for example. If somebody's tagging an environment, they may take an EC2 and tag the compute portion of that resource. But what they don't necessarily understand is EC2s are very modular, right? So you have a compute portion, which is great, but they actually have up to 19 taggable subcomponents that are associated with that EC2. It might be an EBS volume, an elastic IP, the images, subnets, all that sort of stuff. All that stuff can be tagged. And if you're not tagging all the different pieces of that resource, you'll lose the ability to analyze the data for all of those resources. So if you're not tagging it, you can't track the cost, you can't track the observability data. So going through and completing your tags across all of the components of that resource is something that's also a very common issue. And then the last issue that we come across is what we call tag clarity. And when we talk about tag clarity, it's all around syntax, right? So in other words, how many different ways can you spell the word application? We have one customer, I think they had like 15 different variations of the word application in their tagging environment. And the problem with that is that, every time you have a variation of that, every CSP will treat that as a unique and separate tag. And so you lose the ability to look at all those aggregated together. So unless there's not an elegant way with the native CSP tools today to go through and unify all the language associated with all of your tag keys and tag values. And this is a huge issue because it does treat them all separately. Now, separate apart from those four kind of major issues, there's some other challenges that kind of surface along the way as well. So it really goes down to like the maintenance of these tags. So for example, there's not a great way to go out and do full tag changes, right? Where let's just take an example of you have an owner or an employee who left the company and maybe they were the owner for 50 EC2s. And there's no place to go and say, hey, show me all of this person's stuff, select all, and then change the owner to the new person, right? It's either you're trying to go into every single resource and go hunt and peck and find it, which is nobody's going to do that, or you try and write some script that's going to do it and hope you catch everything. Keep in mind, you're trying to navigate across multiple regions, multiple accounts, multiple CSPs. It's really an impossible task to go through and just maintain these once you get going on. Almost every environment that we come across has a multi-cloud environment. And what we see is that they don't have a way to unify the language across these multiple cloud environments, right? And so one of the things that we've done with our solution is we have the ability to kind of pull all of your cloud environments into a single pane of glass and then unify that language in a very quick and efficient manner so that you're always thinking about tags in the same language as you're moving from cloud environment to cloud environment. Tag policy management is also a major issue with the native tools that the CSPs give you. Like for example, in AWS, if you go in and create a tag policy, which you can do, and they have an editor, all of those policies are only effective on a prospective basis. In other words, any new resources that come online, you can enforce that policy against those resources. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't go backwards and clean up all the old stuff. And guess what? I mean, unless you clean up the whole thing, the amount of value there is really diminished pretty quickly. And then obviously things like compliance monitoring. So once you go out and you create a policy, you want to say, okay, well, what percentage of my cloud resources comply with this policy? And more importantly, which ones don't? Because those are the ones I need to go out and find very quickly and fix and get them to the point where they can be compliant with the policy. So just being able to understand, what the policy is, and measure every cloud resource. And keep in mind, we work with companies that have enormous amounts of cloud spend, $100 billion plus a year, and they've got hundreds of thousands of resources that they're managing. So being able to measure compliance against at scale is a major issue. And then the last couple items here, one is what we call tag automation. So we gave an example earlier of how you have to not just tag like the compute portion of an EC2, but you need to find everything that's attached to it and also tag those resources as well. And manually to do that would be extremely onerous. And frankly, companies just won't go through it because they would spend all of their time trying to chase this stuff down. And so, being able to automate that process where you can basically have a rules-based tagging system that says, I want to create a rule that says that every time there's a new EC2, I want to make sure that the compute portion is tagged and that those tags are compliant with the policy. Then I want to go out and find everything that's attached to it, and then automatically copy those tags from the compute to all the subcomponents automatically in real time with no downtime whatsoever. I mean, that is a huge efficiency gain for people trying to maintain tags going forward, especially when you're dealing with large scale ephemeral clusters and things where there's a large number of resources constantly churning. Being able to grab those things and tag them automatically is a huge challenge for companies. And then there's also things like untaggable resources. Like not everything in these CSPs can be tagged, and so being able to go through and being able to identify those items, and we have what we call virtual tags, which allow us to go through and create tags that for non-standard resources, if you will. So being able to address those untaggable resources is also a major issue that's out there. So I'll go ahead and transition to this question number 4. Now, I guess I'll ask Anthony and Dan this question. I'll throw it over to you guys. So we talked about tag coverage, compliance, completeness, and clarity as being like 4 of the major challenges that are in that companies experience today as they try to manage their tag environment. Which of these 4 do you guys see with the companies that you guys work with? Or do any of these kind of stand out more than others? Anthony, I'll start with you.
Oh, this is a hard one. It's almost like saying you have to pick which one's more important: breathing, drinking water, or eating food. I think that it's completeness is probably coverage. It's got to be between one of the two, in my opinion. As probably some of the bigger challenges, because I think the others really stack on top of it. I would have to go with coverage. Not knowing even where to go, and just having the insight is just so fundamental. But everything else, like I said, if that's breathing, then needing to drink water is really quickly afterwards, and eating is just as important. So that's my answer.
Great, love it. Thanks, Anthony. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I think one of the problem statements that we've seen in most enterprise organizations have been consistency across all their dev tools and standards. And so, because obviously part of the whole DevOps is a culture, and the culture is really to kind of do and pick and choose what you have. So really, I mean, creating that standard, and which would be clarity, is really like the first step, and having that consistent across the organization, which is a very much a challenge, right? Because of the DevOps culture and everybody kind of doing their own thing. Now, compliance is obviously, in that same category, because we have to maintain compliance as an organization, and how we do that in terms of mapping our control framework to, technical controls within the cloud architecture is also somewhat challenging. So that obviously those are clarity, and then probably the compliance. And I'm assuming the clarity means like, having a standard that everybody understands, that is that we're all following as an organization. Is that fair?
Exactly. It's all the syntax related things. So to make sure if you don't have 10 different versions of the way you're spelling owner or application or any of the tag keys or values, it's unifying the language across your tagging environment.
Yeah, I agree. And that's been one of the challenges that we've had. So if there is a way that we can easily do that across the organization, even after, because if there's no governance in the way that we're creating standards in the DevOps process, then after the CI/CD pipeline and the branches that are released, you're going to have to go back and kind of clean it up, right?
Great, awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Andrew Chapman, who's going to actually give you a quick demo of our Tag Manager solution. And again, all of the challenges and problems that we just talked about over the past couple of slides, we've tried to build a solution that really addresses all of these needs that are out there. And so I'm going to hand it over to Andrew and let him kind of walk you through a demo of the app.
All right, thank you, Mark. My name is Andrew Chapman. I'm the VP of Operations, which is basically I lead our service delivery team here at Cloud Saver. And let me get tooled up here. All right, so this is Tag Manager as it exists today. And after I get done with this quick demo, I'm going to hand it off to Doug to kind of talk about where we're going from here. Since it's top of mind, I'll start with tag intelligence. So a lot of those metrics that we were just looking at around tag clarity, tag coverage, those sorts of things, we've baked into this app and given an overview of the entire environment. So start with environment summaries and see how many taggable resources there are, total number of tags, average per resource, then overall tag health, which is a composite metric based on those 4 different categories that we were just discussing. And then in the app, it defaults to by resource type, but really you can change this to any dimension you want. So if you want to change from resource type to say application team, you can quickly do that and see what the tag health is across your teams and drive accountability. So if I shift the tag health, I talked about the overall tag health being a composite metric. So we just talked about what coverage, compliance, and clarity is. So those 3 feed into this overall tag health metric. And again, you can see it by any dimension that's available in the database for the app. So one easy thing to do here, and where we generally start from a services perspective once we go through the strategy and the policy work, is clarity. I mean, so 88% clarity means that there's some syntax issues. So in Tag Manager, that's really easy to fix. So if I go over to tag consolidation, here are all the unique keys in every region, every account, every CSP that's connected to Tag Manager. So if I wanted to do something like, DEPT is not my standard, I can update the keys. I can update those keys to my standard. And then that's going to flip me over into Tag Explorer. And this is kind of the workhorse of the entire app. This is where you can slice and dice all of your data and do bulk processing or inline processing. So it's already selected 4 resources for which department has, or DEPT has a value. And it's already set it up where it's going to change it from DEPT to department. I can unselect at this point if I wanted to. I'm not going to. Rename tag keys, and it is actually changing those, consolidating DEPT into departments in the CSP environment. So that is already done. Those tags have been updated in AWS. The thing that I always like to point out here is, this is a small little demo environment. So I just did that for 4 resources. It doesn't matter if it's 4 or 4,000. It's just as easy. It might take a little longer to process if you do 4,000, but it sure beats doing it through the console. Other things that you can do in Tag Explorer, and let me customize some columns here so I can bring in other columns, any columns that are available, all the metadata for any resource, all the tags. So I can bring in, say, owner tag. In the use case that was mentioned earlier, where somebody leaves the organization, I'll just quickly show you how easy that is to address. So I want to say, let's say Mary's left the organization, so I need to reassign her resources. So I get 8 resources. I'm going to select all of them, update tags. Oops. Rename tag values. And I want to rename owner. I want to replace Mary Wilson. And I want that to belong to Aaron Davis going forward. So again, right here, it's 8 resources, could be 8,000, same process. And it's actually updating the tags in the environment. The other thing to note is, and I mentioned it earlier, is this is not just one region or just one account. This is all the regions and all the accounts in every CSP that you want to connect to CloudSaver. So that's where the real power comes. You can see all of your resources in one place and make edits and updates in one place. And I mentioned earlier the inline editing. I'll just show that real quick. So this was finance, and it's the same exact thing. Get that little blue dot, and it's updated in AWS. So that is what I want to show on the demo. And Doug, if you wouldn't mind, I'll hand it to you to talk through what's coming next.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Appreciate it. Hopefully you get to see just a glimpse of how that is a single pane of glass to give you the visibility, give you some insights on the health of your resource tagging, and then how you can quickly apply changes. And I think going back to the analogy that Anthony made earlier, which I really, really liked about, hey, you open this door and you're welcomed into a hallway of hallways, the possibilities around how you can apply um, tagging very quickly and easily and the value that you can get out of it organizationally is really phenomenal. So thanks for sharing that really quickly. So I'll highlight quickly the tag manager tiers and features. So what you were looking at was our standard version of tag manager. The tag explorer query engine is what Andrew was really kind of walking through, showing the bulk tag processing, the tag intelligence. What's coming out in the near future is Pro, and Pro is really all around policy. So tag policy management, virtual tag policies, tag policy compliance monitoring, self-service tag compliance remediation, and execution scheduling. And then the enterprise version that will be coming just after Pro is really all around tag automation. And so you see some items around tag variant group management, drift management. So we're not diving into all of these components, but if you're leveraging CloudFormation, Terraform, some automation capabilities, being able to see drift and having drift detection and being able to remediate those issues very quickly and easily, even with AMI conflict, is something that we've put a lot of thought into, and excited to launch the enterprise version as well, because most of our large enterprise customers and prospects that we've been talking to, the tag automation piece is something that they are very, very, very interested in, along with virtual tagging and some other things that aren't even listed here. So the next one is really, how do we engage with clients? And so we talked a little bit about some value drivers and challenges that organizations have seen with leveraging native CSP tools, how Tag Manager is really kind of an elegant solution to drive change within the organization, to easily make changes to the data, if you will, and clean up the data to enable the business. We're helping organizations, from a SaaS perspective, but then we follow that on with a host of options for customers with tag strategy and roadmap. So developing strategy around policy, as an example, helping customers with doing tag remediation and cleanup. If they needed assistance for a period of time to go in and just make a lot of changes once they've got policy developed, or we've helped them with developing some policy, and then also doing this as a service. So Tag Manager as a service for clients that could benefit from an as a service offering to help with the care and feeding, the ongoing operational management of tagging resources appropriately in their environment. So next slide is question number 5. Which Tag Manager feature do you think would be most beneficial to the enterprise? I have my own thoughts, but maybe I'll pass this on to Anthony and to Dan, perhaps.
Dan, how about you go first on this one?
Okay, all right. Again, all of them are very important. I can't think of one, in terms of, the intelligence piece is important because obviously if you're going to automate it, you need some sort of a process to be able to determine how to structure it. And then multi-cloud, I think it would be second. And then obviously the third, bulk editing, and then line editing would be the fourth. But obviously many customers today are now multiple CSP for obvious reasons, cost, benefit, as well as leveraging each CSP for their capabilities. But that'd be kind of my thought process there.
Excellent. Anthony?
I do think intelligence is important. I think, though, what really jumps out is almost the immediate, like, oh my goodness, that kind of takes over when you start to see this in action, is the ability for bulk editing. Because that's actually, I think, one of the things that's in your face hard when you try to do this, right? When you try to make changes at scale, not knowing what you don't know, right? That's easy to kind of overlook, I think, for a lot of organizations. So even if they had a small finite set that they were like, oh, we're going to manage this, we're going to do this manually, et cetera, they still have to go in and edit and change configs and do the manual work. I think the bulk editing is just a big kapow to me.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with both of you. I think the intelligence piece is critical to give you overall visibility, but then the bulk editing piece is critical. When we hear from clients about the pain that they go through to make changes after having done a tremendous amount of digital forensics, to find a resource across CSPs, across accounts, across regions, it's really challenging. One of our customers had also been doing things like searching Splunk logs to try to find out who the owner was. So we've built some specific capabilities within Tag Manager to help a client define and find who that resource owner was, who touched it last. And that's so the bulk editing piece, I agree with you both. The intelligence is critical. The bulk editing is really great to have. So thank you both. I think we have one or two questions from the audience, and let me see if I can pull up one of these. What's the source from where the cloud resources are pulled? AWS config versus billing versus resource groups and tag editor. So ultimately, we pull these resources from APIs. So great question, by the way, and thank you for it. Each of these resources in AWS has its own set of APIs, and we use those for the resource data. There's a host of additional data sources that we can leverage, including working on some unique partnerships to get additional types of observability data with some third parties and that type of thing. But hopefully that helps answer that question. Absolutely leverage APIs to get some of that resource data. And I think that's the last question that we had. So we'll jump over to just a quick mention for all of you in the audience. So we have a 30-day free trial for customers that are interested in trying to get that visibility in a single pane of glass for all of your resources, and how can I quickly leverage Tag Manager to see the health of my environment and apply changes in my environment. So happy to give you a 30-day free trial if you go to cloudsaver.com/Tag Manager. And then I'll share with you one additional note on upcoming webinars. So this was the third in a series of webinars, and the next one will be Tag Manager for governance specifically. And I want to thank Dan and Anthony. I've known both of you for quite some time. So grateful to have you both here on the call. It's very, very, very exciting to have you guys join us. Appreciate your expertise, your commentary, and thank you so much for joining Mark and Andrew and I. And if anyone would like to have a personalized demo, happy to have questions, send us a note, shoot me a note. And we've got Dan and Anthony's contact information here again as well. But we appreciate you taking the time to just hear a little bit about what we're doing with Tag Manager, some of the challenges specifically around security use cases, and there's dozens beyond kind of some of the ones that we illuminated today. But thank you again for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. And Dan and Anthony, thank you so much for your time.